For simming, most important thing you need for simming is you need the Simc add-on. Obviously, you get the Simc add-on through CurseForge or whatever thing you used for receiving your add-ons. I'm most familiar with CurseForge just because it's what I've used for a while. But you need the Simulationcraft add-on. Once you get on that, there are very simple guide videos on how to set this up. It's pretty simple once you get it all set up. But after that, once you get into game, you'll have this little icon somewhere on your minimap. All you're doing if you ever want to sim anything is you click the Simc add-on and you Control C. That will copy. All that copies is it copies basically your character. It copies all your saved loadouts on your talent in your talents. It copies all the gear you have crafted, gems, everything like that. It copies any gear from your it copies any gear from your bags. Once you have that copied, if you go to Simc, there are a few different tabs for this. So there's Top Gear, Droptimizer, Quick Sim, Gear Compare, Advanced, and more. The more is Stats. Stats, I'll kind of go through each one and tell you what each one will be used for. Typically, you don't really want to use the stats one. Obviously, it says Raidbot strongly advises against using stat weights. It's an outdated tool, so I wouldn't really recommend using it. If you are anytime looking to use the stats, all it will do is basically tell you what stat is most prioritized for you for what you're looking for, or at least what gives you the most value currently. And obviously, that's going to change for every single piece of stat you get on your pieces of gear. It's going to change. So if you get 50 more crit, your stat weights are going to change. So right now, I'm currently in my AoE talent build, my full AoE. You can sim anywhere. Normally, we typically like simming anywhere between. I like simming anywhere between 4 and like 8 targets. 5's a pretty common number. It gives a baseline for like 1 or 2 pulls being pulled together in M+. So that's typically what we use. But I'll just do 6 for, or I'll do 5, whatever. Typically, you want to use 5 minutes. If you want to look for like burst, like when you're using Icy Veins or Blizzard or anything like that, you can go for like a minute sim. But I wouldn't really recommend going like a minute sim. A lot of the time, a minute sim will prioritize on-use cooldowns, and it doesn't really simulate M+ that well, especially if you're looking for like better M+ gear. So I would just recommend going for 5 minutes. That's kind of just a standard. You're hitting AoE for 5 minutes. But yeah, for all of these, you can change any of these you want. I would always keep weekly over nightly. This changes every Monday. It's obviously built from this. For any of the raid buffs, there are a few things you can change here. A potion, Simc default. You shouldn't really need to change any of these. You can just leave it how it is. You can obviously just leave all of them as the default. And then you also get raid buffs. So you can choose whether you want Lust being on there, if you want Mystic Touch or Chaos Brand from a Demon Hunter or a Monk. Anything like that, you can sim how you're going to be doing. If there's anything you don't want to sim, you can obviously take it off. Like if you are someone who doesn't use potions, or you don't want to use potions, you can take off potions. If you're not going to be someone who's eating food or want to try a specific kind of food to see what sims better, you can always change different kinds of food and things like that. But obviously using Simc default is pretty standard. There's nothing really wrong with that. There is one thing. So in terms of the fight style, primarily you will likely be wanting to be using Patchwork. Patchwork basically sims as a boss that doesn't move and has no mechanics. So your character will basically be stationary for the entire 5 minutes, just casting. There's nothing going on. As it says, no movement, single target. The only thing with Patchwork, especially for Frost Mages that might need to be taken care of, is that Patchwork can't be frozen. It's considered a boss mob. And so if it can't be considered frozen, that means a lot of our things won't, like Frostbite will never freeze the target, because a mob that can't be frozen can't be hit by Frostbite. And so if you are using Patchwork and you want to sim AoE as you would in M+, you can. You would use the target underscore level equals 70 custom APL in the custom APL section. What this does is basically drops like the mob's level to 70 as it says, and just makes it so that the mob can actually get frozen. If you don't want to do the target equals 70, you can change to using target dummy. The only downside with using target dummy is it does disable all raid buffs, and you don't use any consumables. So that's why it's not primarily recommended, but you can use it. So that's why if you are using Patchwork and you want to sim AoE, I'd highly recommend doing the target underscore level equals 70. Again, that's for if you're simming M+. If you're simming something like a raid fight, like if you want to sim for Primal Council and you want to do four bosses, obviously Primal Council can't be frozen. You can't freeze those. You can't freeze those mobs. So obviously you would take away the target _70. But just in this case, I'll sim for a standard AoE, a stat thing. And again, I'll say it again, I would not recommend using stat weights, but I'll just show you what it would generate. It would basically generate what your stats are for AoE purposes. All this will give you is how important each one would be, and I guess like the power that you would get from every single stat point. Sims do take a little bit. Obviously, there's a lot of iterations going on, and obviously it depends on how many people are actually simming at the time. So you just kind of have to wait for the sim. So in this case, it's telling me that per point of intellect, or intellect is saying that it says if I added 595 intellect to your character, each point would add an average of 23.26 DPS. So it's saying one intellect is 23.26 DPS. So in this case, in AoE, it's prioritizing obviously intellect over everything, followed by crit, then verse, then haste, then mastery. So all this is saying is basically what you should prioritize for that certain scenario. Again, would not recommend stat weights. Stat weights will change all the time, depending on every piece of gear you swap. You swap one piece of gear, your stats will change. You swap between 3 targets and 2 targets, your stat weights will change. Don't really recommend using this, but this, if you wanted to do it, that's what it is. Going through the other options, top gear. Top gear will be used to be determining if you want to sim between 2 pieces. So this is something that you're going to be having in your bags, or you just picked up from a run and you want to see if it's worth or not using it. So if I copied my Simc that I got from the game again, so this will be every piece of gear that I have in my bags. So I have, if I look to see, let's say I wanted to see if these bracers of Arcane Mystery is going to sim better than my 418 bracers. So how I would do this is I basically click this item, and it would put both of these as wrists. And let's say I also want to sim for Iceblood Death Snare and AoE. Now, so I have, when it does the sim, it'll be doing the sims in comparison to each other. You can go through these. You can change if you want to be simming different enchants. You want to change your main hand enchant. You want to see if a different leg enchant's better. You want to change your ring enchants. You want to change your gems. Anything like that's fine. If you are changing your gems or enchants, you'll most likely need to choose this replace existing gems and enchants option. What this will do is it makes sure that it will basically replace all of the enchants that you have and see if there's anything better at the time. If not, when you don't have this clicked, it will only try and correct those that aren't any gem sockets or enchants that aren't currently on your gear is the only time that this will go. So currently, when I do this and I don't have this clicked, nothing will actually show up for this. And so now I'm looking at my talent builds. This goes through all the talent builds that you currently have in game. So currently I have the active one. If you look, my active one is the same as the M+ AoE one. So these are the same talent build. That it always tells you which ones you're active and gives you all your other ones. And now same thing in the stat weights section where I talked about patchwork. 5 bosses, 5 minutes as all the default things, and as the target level 70. And now I'll click find top gear. So what this will do is it'll do simulations, finding out which pieces of gear are actually better in which scenarios, and it'll show me what pieces of gear would be a DPS upgrade or a decrease, and it'll tell me how much. You can see if it's like percent based, or you can look at the actual raw DPS number. So in my case, it's telling me that if I wanted to go full AoE for 5 minutes, it's telling me that my Braces of Arcane Mystery and my Iceblood Death Snare are 3.7% better than what I currently have equipped. It's telling me it would be an 8,000 DPS increase. So that's running full AoE talents, and this would be a full AoE trinket, and it's prioritizing a crit haste bracers over what I currently have equipped. And obviously you can see what I had equipped previously. You can go back to your top gear after running your sim. You saw that I had my bracers were haste mastery. So primarily crit is typically something that's a little bit more prioritized than AoE over haste. Haste is a little bit more prioritized than single target. So now what I have currently is my going through this again, I'll keep those same exact sims on. I'll go to Ice Blood Destinaire and I'll go to the bracers. And now, let's say I wanted to sim single target instead of 5 target. So I would now change to, I could change to my M plus AoE or my M plus single target. I'll change to my M plus single target because I'm kind of prioritizing what it'll be like. So now if I go to M plus single target, this is typically the talent build that I would use in Tyrannical weeks, versus the M plus AoE is like a full AoE build that I would use in Fortified weeks. So that's kind of the difference between the two. So now this one will compare all of the pieces of gear that I was wearing, plus it will compare the 2 talent trees to each other in terms of the damage. So now if I do this and I want to look at how well I would actually perform in single target, so this would be simming it as if like I'm fighting a boss fight in M plus with these talents. I could do the sim as 1 target. You could take the target level off if you wanted. Don't really need it or not. In this case, since I would be simming a single target fight, I would primarily take target level. I would take this out of the equation because in M plus, the single target bosses, any of the bosses in M plus can't be frozen by frostbite. So I would, if you are recommending looking at like M plus talents and looking to see what's going to be sim better for bosses, I would recommend taking that out. And I would do another sim. So this one's going to take a little longer. There's a little bit more to do, so it's got to go through more iterations. Now, see, now that I finished, I can go look, and now it's going to tell me what's better for the options that I gave it. So it's going to be doing the differences between the 2 pair bracers. It's going to be doing the difference between Ice Blood Death Snare and my other 2 trinkets that I had equipped, and also the talent build. And now looking at the iterations that it's showing me, it's telling me that my current gear is giving me this. And if I would just swap to my M plus talent tree, which is any of these talent swaps, that it would give me this much of an increase in single target. So this is in relation to, this would be this much better on an M plus boss fight. So that's basically what it is for Top Gear. Top Gear, you can basically see how different talents would compare with each other, as well as how different pieces of gear, whether one piece of gear is better than another in different scenarios. Other than Top Gear, there's Droptimizer. Droptimizer can be used for multiple different reasons. Again, I'll paste my Simc. You typically want to use Droptimizer to see what's going to be better. You can look at raid pieces, what's going to be an upgrade for raid loot, you can look at what's going to be an upgrade from M plus dungeons. You see if there's anything from normal dungeons or professions. For me, let's say I'm going to look at professions, and I obviously can craft gear at 418. So let's see if there's any upgrades that I can have. If I wanted to, you need to choose which preferred secondary stats you want. So for me, let's say I'm gonna prefer crit haste or crit mastery, and I'm not really gonna add a gem for this, so I'm not really gonna worry about that. So it's gonna sim any of the items that I could possibly craft that would have crit mastery at a 418 item level. And now I can choose: do I want it for 1 boss? Do I want it for 5 bosses? And we're gonna see what that gives me. And at this time, my talents is also acting with this talent tree. It'll tell you your current talent loadout, which is this. And if you look through my other talents, you'll see that's my M plus AoE talent build. If I wanted to change this without actually going through Top Gear or changing it in my character in-game, there's a way you can do this, but this needs to be in your Simc itself. So like if I wanted to sim M plus single target, I would replace this, I would copy this, and I would put it in this line. And that basically replaces this as my current talent tree. You obviously don't need to do this in-game to do this. This will just show up in your Simc. So now when I do this Droptimizer, this will use my M plus single target talents instead of the one I currently had equipped. I'll do patchwork on 1 boss. Not going to have the target underscore level 70 in there, and I'm going to run the Droptimizer. This one will probably take a little, might take a little bit as well because there's so many crafted pieces of gear I can craft. Thank you for the follow, Jaco. Once this is done, it'll tell me what increases different pieces of gear may give me. So currently this is telling me the only DPS increase that I could possibly craft in the specific situation of running my M plus single target talents and having 1 boss fight The crafted back with crit mastery would give me a 140 DPS increase. So that's obviously very minimal. I obviously am not too picky with something that's like, 140 DPS. It's very marginal and very a specific scenario. And that's probably because I have a 415 back. So technically just an item level increase. It's 3 item level, and it's also a crit mastery back. So that's probably why it's sitting that a little bit higher. Other than Droptimizer, there's Quick Sim. Quick Sim will basically just give you a quick simulation of how much damage your player will actually do. In this case, instead of using my M+ single target loadout, I'm going to change to my pure single target loadout. So same thing that I did before in the Droptimizer. I'm going to copy this talent export and put it back into this talent tree. And again, you saw it just copied here. I'm going to do patchwork 1 boss, and I'm not going to do the target 70. Run a quick sim. Quick sim is basically just going to give you a DPS number, and you're going to see how well your character should perform. So it's saying that my character should do 92,000 DPS in a 5-minute 1-target simulation and patchwork. It'll also show you any buffs that you currently have equipped. It'll show you your damage breakdown, or what your damage breakdown theoretically should be, and it'll also show you a sample ability log. So this is basically will show you what the sim is doing in terms of how it does its damage. So this will show you all the casts. So it starts with its Frostbolt. Unfortunately, the APL for sims can't have more than 1 pre-casted ability. So we can't actually do the Frostbolt Flurry combo in the precast. So it's saying, it's starting the fight by doing Frostbolt into Icy Veins. It's using its Pot and then Frozen Orb and Ice Lance, Ice Lance. At this point, it's assuming that you don't have any Fingers of Frost procs. It's going into a Frostbolt Flurry, into 2 Ice Lances, Frostbolt Flurry, 2 Ice Lances, Frostbolt Flurry, 2 Ice Lances, Frostbolt, Rune of Power, and this just goes through your every single ability you use for the next 5 minutes. Obviously, just like it says, it's 1 iteration. It's not a guide on how to play your character. It's just a simulation as to how, with RNG, the sim is using its certain procs at this point in time. So don't look at this sample ability log and try and emulate this exactly. It'll obviously be different for every fight. You're going to get different procs. But yeah, that's what Quick Sim will do. And you can also, if you wanted to open up a little bit more to see what your actual talent tree was in Quick Sim, you click this little arrow here, and it'll show you your talent tree. And pure single target, this is the talent tree. I'm running 2 times Deep Shatter instead of Freezing Winds. But this is the pure single target talent tree. Other than Quick Sim, you have the gear compare option. So I obviously have my Simc import still in here. Same thing as before. Gear compare, the way you use gear compare is you need to add specific gear sets. So like for me, the gear set that I would probably craft here, I've been looking to try and toy with maybe crafting the Azure Weave set. So let's say I want to create the Azure Weave set. How you do this is you need to add every single item individually to the set itself. So I need to look for the Azure Weave. In my case, I would do the mantle because I currently have a 421 chest and only I have 418 shoulders. I don't really have 418 shoulders. So I would change this to 418. Need to add another item. Azure Weave is obviously a two embellished items. The other one is the slippers, 418. The enchant doesn't really matter because it's not a DPS increase at all to have the boot enchant on it. So but it doesn't really matter. I'll put that on there. And then obviously if I'm running Azure Weave, that means I have to drop both the Lariat and a Mice of the Blue. So that means I'll need a different neck piece on here. So let's see, I go with the Ukul Ancestry Beads, which is the neck from Nakud, which is Haste Mastery. If I sim it at, let's say I'm simming it at Max Valor, so I'd sim it at 415 because I don't currently have a 418 or a 421 would mean I'd get it out of vault. If I sim it at 415, this just means I would loot it and upgrade it to Max Valor. And now looking at my gems, I'd look to try and do the same gems that I have currently. So right now I'm running the primary stat with Mastery Gem. I'm running a Crit Strike with Mastery. And I'm running a Haste with Mastery. Now, most likely this would actually change because the reason I'm running these for the Lariat would be because the Lariat is proccing the Mastery proc from the gems, similar to what my rings are running. They're running the Crit Mastery and then Crit Mastery. If I were to swap off the Lariat, I would most likely swap these gems to be Mastery heavy, so it'd probably be like Mastery Crit, Mastery Haste, something like that. You can add multiple gear sets if you'd like. Let's say I wanted to add another gear set to try and do a simulation. Let's say I wanted to see how much a different back was. Let's see how much a different back was. So I change fireproof Drake, I think is one of them. I would search for fireproof drape. I would put that at, let's say I put it at 415, and I do the avoidance enchant, which is the same thing I currently have on mine. At 415 item level, I'm not going to change the item level. And so now, same thing as always for all the other sims. You do patchwork one boss, and I'm going to leave the target level out of here. You can add as many gear sets as you want. It's going to compare the gear sets to each other, seeing which one sims better than the other. Again, I'm doing patchwork, one boss, 5 minutes. And I can do the compare items. So again, this will compare the sets based to each other, seeing which one's going to sim better than each other. So currently, my set is this one, the one that I'm wearing currently. It's saying that the fireproof... I don't know why I said Drake. The fireproof drape that I have would be a 0.2% DPS decrease compared to what I'm currently wearing in single target. And the Azure Reef set with the Ukul Ancestry beads would also be a 0.2% DPS decrease. So this is basically, it compares the sets with each other. You can obviously create as many of these compares that you want. A lot of the time, people would use gear compare for depending on or seeing which secondary stats would be better. So in my case, if I ran this again, let's say I wanted to change the stats on my offhand, and I didn't want any of these other sets. I'll remove both of the gear sets. Let's say I want to change my offhand to crit haste, and my thing is called the Crackling Codex. 418. I want to change it to crit haste, and there's no embellishment and there's no enchant. And it's currently haste mastery. Let's say I want to say to crit mastery. Now this is typically what we would use to try and see if you want to change stats on things. Secondary stats, crit mastery. Let's say I want to see if a crit verse one would be better by chance. Obviously the gear set name doesn't matter, it's just an easy way to determine this in the actual sims. Crackling Codex, 418, secondary stats, and crit verse. Let's say that's all the sims I want to do for now. Again, I do the same thing as before, compare the items. Again, this will do the simulation comparing all the gear sets to each other, seeing which one will give me the most increase or decrease. As it turns out, the one I'm currently wearing is considered the best that I could. The crit mastery one is a 0.1 DPS decrease, the crit haste is a 0.2, and the crit verse is a 0.4% decrease. So that's kind of how you use gear compare. It's really just comparing. You can use it to compare stats. You can use it to change like stats in your ring. If you wanted to change your ring from I have crit haste on my crafted ring, I could see if crit mastery would technically be an increase. You can obviously do this for AoE sims. You would just you'd want your AoE talents on, and you can change to patchwork, and you can do 5 target, or you could do target dummy and 5 target. Again, patchwork, if you wanted to sim AoE, I'd probably recommend doing the target underscore level 70 portion for that. So we'll go back to the last option is advanced. I really wouldn't look into the advanced unless you really know what you're doing with SimC. The only thing that I really did with advanced is I have a specific thing down here which basically sims different files. Props to Manathar for this. Manathar is the one that gave me this profile set. It basically just sims how each of the different files would sim for you. So in pure single, again, I'm in my. This one doesn't have me in my pure single target. This one has me in my spider loadout. So if I wanted to change my pure single target, again, I would need to change my talent loadout here. And now what this will do is it'll do the same thing as normal, but now it'll compare all of the different files to each other. There's obviously less options available in advanced, because all of it will basically be done within your actual SimC prompt itself. Same thing as before, you just run the sim. And now for this one, this will basically tell you which file is going to sim better in single, and at least for me, in pure single target. So it'll compare the charged isolation, static empowerment, elemental chaos, corrupting rage, tepid verse, and then glacial fury. So as it says in pure single target, it's saying static empowerment is obviously the best one you could use, followed by charged isolation. In reality, these two are very hard to use in practice. Obviously in patchwork, you're literally standing there doing nothing the entire time. Obviously these will sim better because there's no movements or anything going on. In a real like raid scenario, you're never going to be standing still. And so for these, by default, basically the default file is tepid verse. Obviously that's why it's saying it's such a little increase, followed by elemental chaos and then corrupting rage. You can obviously change the advanced sim to whatever you wanted to do. I could change it to my AoE talents and simmed it for 5 target and seeing what it would have given me, and that would have given me what I wanted for, you know, M+. So let's see what I do for there. Let's see if I change to M+ talents. And let's say I change to 5 bosses. Again, I'm not very familiar with the advanced, so I'm not positive where. I believe I would put the target underscore level 70 thing in the advanced, but again, not very positive, so I'm just going to leave it how it is. If I ran this simulation, this would basically be simming my AoE talents in 5 target. And it'll tell me which, since I also had the file thing at the very bottom, it would tell me which of the files is better for which case. In this case, it's telling me that Elemental Chaos would be a DPS decrease, as well as Glacial Fury. Tepid Verse is saying it's the same. That's because Tepid Verse is the default, so these are just 2 iterations of the same thing. Followed by Corrupting Rage, Charged Isolation, and Static Empowerment. That's basically all there is to SimC. The major thing you obviously need is you need to install the SimC add-on to begin with. And the main thing you're going to be using SimC for is looking for, let's say you get, you know, an item drop out of M+, and you want to see if it's an actual increase. You would, once you loot it, you would copy your SimC export. You'd put this into it's raidbots.com. You'd use that in Top Gear. You'd click the piece you wanted to sim with each other, and you'd do your simulation, and it would tell you which piece is simming better in that case. And that's basically the rundown for how you use SimC.